night it happened, I felt like the whole city was pressing down on my shoulders. The Crystal Palace restaurant shimmered with gold chandeliers and soft music, but none of it covered the ache in my feet or the exhaustion running through my body. I had been working double shifts for 3 weeks to cover my grandmother's medical bills, and I kept telling myself I could push through one more night. I didn't know my entire life was about to change. I noticed him the moment he walked in. Everyone did. Frank Gallagher, the most feared man in Boston. People said he built his empire on broken promises and shattered bones, that even the police avoided crossing his path. When he entered, the whole room went silent, like someone had sucked the sound out of the air. 2 tall men in expensive suits followed behind him, their eyes sweeping the room like they were scanning for threats. I tried not to stare. I tried to focus on my work. But when the maitre d' whispered, "Table 12," and handed me their menus, my stomach dropped. I was the one who had to serve him. I took a deep breath, straightened my apron, and walked toward the corner table, tucked perfectly between the entrance and the kitchen, his usual spot. Even from a distance, I felt his presence, sharp and heavy. He didn't look at me when I arrived, didn't acknowledge me at all. His conversation with his associates was low, dangerous, almost like a storm waiting to happen. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I take your drink orders?" I asked. My hands shook slightly, but my voice stayed steady. I was proud of that. Frank didn't answer. He didn't even lift his eyes. One of the men beside him gave their drink list, and I nodded quickly, backing away before I messed something up. When I returned with their tray of drinks, the room felt even quieter than before. Everyone watched, pretending not to. That's when it happened. Frank's hand bumped his whiskey glass as I set down the tray. The glass tipped, spilling dark amber liquid across his perfectly tailored suit. I gasped, reaching for napkins, but before I could react, his chair scraped loudly across the floor. He stood. The room froze. "You stupid girl," he snapped, his voice cutting straight through me. He towered over the table, his eyes burning with rage. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" "More than you'll make in a year. I could buy this restaurant just to fire you." My heart slammed in my chest so hard I couldn't breathe. Every instinct told me to apologize, to cry, to beg him not to hurt me. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the napkins. But then something else rose inside me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was remembering how hard I'd been fighting just to keep my grandmother alive. For the first time that night, I looked directly into his eyes. And I refused to break. I lifted my chin, felt the tremble in my throat steady, and before I could stop myself, I said the 4 words that made every person in the restaurant go silent. "Not yours to spill." The air froze. You could hear forks stop midway to mouths. Even his associates reacted, their hands moving subtly toward the inside of their jackets like they were preparing for violence. For a second, I thought I had just killed myself. But instead of exploding, something shifted in Frank's expression. The anger faded, replaced by something I couldn't read. Interest, curiosity, respect. Slowly, he sat back down. "Bring me another drink," he said, his voice suddenly calm, almost soft. Then his eyes fixed on me. "And your name? I want to know who has the courage to speak to me that way." My legs were shaking as I walked to the bar, but somehow, when I came back with the new drink, my voice didn't crack. "My name is Samantha," I said. He raised his glass slightly toward me, still studying me like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. "I've broken men twice your size for half that attitude," he said. "Yet here you stand. Interesting." The room slowly returned to its quiet hum, but nothing felt the same. Something had changed in the air. Between us, inside me. 3 days later, the restaurant was closed, and I was wiping down tables when a knock echoed through the quiet space. When I turned and looked through the glass doors, my stomach dropped. Frank Gallagher stood outside. Alone. No guards, no suits, no storm behind him, just him. And when I opened the door, his voice was nothing like the voice that had roared at me that night. "I'm not here for dinner," he said. "I came to apologize." I never imagined a Mafia boss would apologize to me, but there he was, looking almost human, almost vulnerable. "May I come in?" And even though every piece of logic in my body whispered no, my hand moved on its own. I opened the door wider. Letting him inside changed everything. When I let him inside that night, the restaurant felt completely different than it did during business hours. Without customers, without music, without the clatter of dishes, it felt quiet and strangely intimate. The dim lights made the shadows softer, and for the first time, Frank Gallagher didn't look like the man who terrified half the city. He looked like someone carrying the weight of 1,000 choices he could never undo. He walked slowly toward the bar and took a seat, his hands resting on the counter, fingers tapping lightly like he wasn't sure what to do with them. I stayed a few feet away, unsure if I was supposed to talk or wait. "Most people are afraid to look at me," he said finally. "But you weren't. Not that night." "I was terrified," I admitted, "but I didn't want you to think you could talk to me like that." He lifted his eyes to mine, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. They weren't cold like before. They were searching, almost curious. "Your grandmother," he said quietly. "You mentioned her once, didn't you? Medical bills?" I frowned. "I didn't tell you that." "No," he said, a small smile lifting his mouth. "But I pay attention." I felt a strange warmth rise in my chest. It made no sense. He was dangerous. He was unpredictable. He was someone I should run from. Yet there I was, standing across from him, feeling like he was seeing straight through every layer of my life. "Why do you care?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the empty restaurant, then back at me with a softness I hadn't seen the night he yelled at me. "Respect is earned," he said quietly. "And you earned mine when you looked me in the eye." Something flickered between us, something I didn't want to name yet. We talked for almost an hour, about school, about my nursing classes, about how he grew up in the South Side projects with nothing but fists and survival instincts. He told me things I knew he didn't share with anyone. Not his men. Not the world he controlled. Maybe not even himself. When he finally stood to leave, he placed something on the counter. A business card. Heavy paper. Only his name and a number. "If you ever need anything," he said. My breath caught. I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a warning. After he left, I went home and stared at that card for hours. I told myself I should throw it away. I told myself letting him into my life was a mistake. But my fingers kept tracing the printed letters, and deep down I already knew the truth. I wanted to see him again. A week later, it happened without planning. I walked into a coffee shop near my apartment, and there he was, sitting alone by the window, reading a newspaper, dressed in jeans and a sweater like a man with a normal life. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen between fear and something that felt dangerously close to excitement. He looked up, and our eyes met. His face changed instantly. Softer, warmer. "Mind if I join you?" I asked before my brain could catch up. He closed the newspaper and nodded toward the empty chair. "Please." The conversation started awkwardly. Then, suddenly, it wasn't awkward at all. He listened when I talked, really listened, about my grandmother, my dreams, my fears. No one had done that for a long time. "You have purpose," he said quietly, "a direction. Most people never find that." "You don't?" I asked gently. Frank shook his head. "Life put me somewhere I didn't expect. I learned to survive there, to rule there. Walking away isn't simple." "Is that what you want?" I whispered. He didn't answer, not with words. But the silence said enough. When we left the coffee shop, he held the door for me, his hand brushing lightly against mine. A touch so small, but it felt like electricity under my skin. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today." No one talks to me like that. I saved the number under his name before I realized what I was doing. Days turned into quiet meetings after my shifts, late-night phone calls, conversations that went deeper than I expected. I kept telling myself I wasn't getting involved. I wasn't falling for him. But one evening, sitting on a rooftop overlooking the harbor, I realized I was lying to myself. The city lights glowed below us. The water shimmered. He had brought a picnic basket with expensive wine and food I couldn't pronounce. He didn't act like a mafia boss that night. He acted like a man trying to remember what it felt like to be human. Then, his voice broke the silence. "The Petro family is watching," he said. "They think I've gone soft." "Because of me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned toward me, and everything about his face changed. "No," he said. He took my hand slowly, like he was afraid I'd pull away. "You're the first thing in my life that feels like strength, not power." My breath caught in my throat, my heart beat faster. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. I was falling for him. And falling for a man like Frank Gallagher would change everything. The next few weeks felt like living two lives at once. In the daytime, I was just Samantha, a waitress and a nursing student, trying to survive bills and long shifts. But at night, when Frank picked me up in that sleek black car with tinted windows, I entered a different world. A world where a dangerous man looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. But that world had shadows I couldn't ignore. It started with the men outside my apartment. I noticed them one morning. Two strangers sitting in a dark sedan, pretending to scroll their phones but never taking their eyes off my building. At first, I hoped I was imagining things, but the next day, and the next, they were there again. "I think I'm being watched," I texted Frank. His response came instantly. "Stay inside. I'm sending Joey. Don't leave alone." My hands trembled as I read it. That was the moment I understood something deep and terrifying. Being near Frank meant stepping into the line of fire. 15 minutes later, Joey, his right-hand man, showed up with 3 others. Their presence made the car across the street pull away fast, disappearing into traffic like it had been caught doing something wrong. "Boss wants you at his place tonight," Joey said. His face was serious, unreadable. "It's safer." Frank was waiting at the penthouse door when I arrived. He wasn't calm. He wasn't collected. He was furious. Fear flickered behind his eyes, hidden beneath the anger. "They want me to know they can reach you," he said as he pulled me into his arms, his heart pounding against mine. "They want to test how far they can push before I snap." "Who?" I whispered. "The Petrovs, my rivals. They're watching you." The realization hit me like ice in my veins. I wasn't just a girl he liked. I was a weakness his enemies wanted to exploit. At dinner, I barely touched my food. My mind raced with every possibility. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't want to be hunted because of someone else's war. "I never asked to be part of this," I said quietly. "I never wanted danger in my life." Frank reached across the table and touched my fingers gently. It was such a soft gesture for a man known for breaking bones. "I know," he said, "and I never expected to care about anyone enough to fear losing them." That admission settled between us like a truth too heavy to ignore. He told me about his childhood that night. The poverty, the violence, protecting his siblings when he was barely old enough to protect himself. He described the first time he hurt someone badly enough to send them to the hospital, when he was only 16, because the man had threatened his sister. "I didn't plan it. I didn't think. It just happened," he said softly. "And afterward?" I asked. "Afterward," he said, meeting my eyes, "I realized fear could keep the people I loved safe." Hearing his story broke something open in me. For the first time, I saw the boy he'd been long before the world taught him to break or be broken. And suddenly, falling for him didn't feel like a mistake. It felt inevitable. Later, we walked along an empty beach. The waves crashed softly, the air cold against my cheeks. He stopped, turned toward me, and cupped my face in his hands like I was something precious. Then I did something reckless, something that changed everything. I kissed him first. He kissed me back like he had waited his whole life for that moment. Gently, carefully, as if he was afraid I might break. When we finally pulled away, he leaned his forehead against mine. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered, "and it terrifies me more than anything I've faced." My heart shook, but the truth slipped out before I could stop it. "I know. Because I'm falling too." We didn't say anything else. We didn't have to. The waves kept crashing, the stars kept glowing, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe in the arms of the most dangerous man I'd ever met. But safety was an illusion. 6 weeks into our relationship, I saw that black car again. Only this time, the men inside didn't hide their intent. Their eyes followed me the second I stepped out of the restaurant after my shift. I texted Frank again. Strange car. Not your men. His reply came even faster this time. Stay where you are. I'm coming. Joey arrived with armed men before Frank did, and the moment I got into Frank's penthouse, he pulled me against him so tightly I could barely breathe. They're escalating, he said. They want a war. Joey spread photos on the table, pictures of my apartment, my restaurant, even the route I took to school. They're testing your resolve, Joey warned, seeing if the rumors are true. What rumors? I asked. Frank looked away, jaw tight. That you're my weakness, he said. That I care too much. My throat tightened. Do you? I whispered. He lifted his eyes slowly, eyes that held storms, battles, and something softer he tried to hide. Yes, he said simply. That night, everything changed again, and not for the better. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to raised voices in Frank's study. I crept toward the door and heard Joey's grave tone. 15. Dead at a Petrov club. Including the youngest son. They're saying it was us. What? Frank snapped. I never ordered that. Someone inside is acting on their own, Joey said. Someone wants this war. A traitor, a dangerous one. My heart raced, my stomach twisting. This wasn't another warning. This was a spark being thrown into dry tinder. When Frank came out of the study, his face was carved from stone. Someone's trying to trigger all-out war, he said. And they're using you to push me over the edge. I felt my whole world tilt, my life, my dreams, my grandmother. I was in too deep. Frank, I whispered, what does this mean for us? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he cupped my face gently, the same way he had on the beach. It means everything is about to get worse, he said quietly, but I will protect you with my life. I believed him, but I also knew his world was closing in on us, and soon we'd have to choose between love and survival. For the next 3 weeks, I lived in Frank's penthouse, like a guest in a gilded cage. I couldn't go to class, I couldn't work, I couldn't visit my grandmother. Armed guards followed me from room to room, and every time a car backfired outside, my heart jumped into my throat. Frank tried to hide how worried he was, but I felt it in every glance, every stiff movement. Every night he stayed awake pacing the windows. I had become the first thing he couldn't control, and that terrified him. One evening, after another long day of tension and silence, I found him standing at the window, with the city lights reflecting off his face. My grandmother called today, I said quietly. She thinks I'm avoiding her. He didn't turn around. The Petrovs have gone quiet, he said instead. Too quiet. They're planning something. My chest tightened. This wasn't a life. It was fear disguised as protection. I can't live like this anymore, I whispered. He finally turned to look at me. His expression wasn't anger, it was dread. What are you saying? He asked. I need my life back, I said. My apartment, my job, my studies. I can't stay locked in here forever. His jaw clenched. They'll kill you to get to me. Then what's the alternative? I asked softly. I stay here, and you keep killing to keep me safe? Until there's nobody left? Quote. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I loved him, but I couldn't survive in his world. He walked toward me slowly, as if each step hurt. I could walk away, he said quietly. Give up everything, hand control to Joey, liquidate what I can, leave the life behind. I stared at him, stunned. You'd do that, I whispered. For you, he said, if it means you're safe. His words hit me like a punch of hope and fear mixed together. But leaving the mob wasn't something anyone did. Not alive, anyway. They'd hunt you down, I warned. Not if I pay the right price, he said. Every empire has a cost, even mine. That night, as I slept beside him, Frank made the first call to dismantle a kingdom built over 20 years. By dawn, he had set a plan into motion that could free us or destroy him completely. The next morning, he slid a passport across the table toward me. "You're leaving tonight," he said. "I've arranged for you to stay with my cousin in Vancouver until this is finished." I stared at the passport. Claire Bennett. A woman I didn't know. A woman who wasn't me. "My grandmother," I whispered. "I've arranged for her to transfer to a private care facility in Vancouver," he said. "Everything paid for. She'll join you soon." Then Joey burst into the room with news that changed the timeline. "They know, boss," he said urgently. "The Petrovs know you're making moves. We need to move now." Later that night, Joey took me to the airport in an unmarked car. As we drove away, I saw Frank standing in the shadows of the garage, watching me go, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just watched me leave, as if memorizing me in case he never saw me again. Life in Vancouver was quiet, isolated, safe. Frank's cousin, David, a gentleman with kind eyes, took me to the cabin where I'd be hiding. The mountains stood tall around us, silent witnesses to my exile. Days passed slowly, weeks even slower. Frank sent short messages through secure channels. "Progress. Stay safe. I miss you." Then, one night, everything changed. The news announced a massive federal raid in Boston. Dozens arrested, high-ranking men taken down. Joey's face flashed on the screen in handcuffs, but not Frank's. No mention of him, no arrest, no body. The uncertainty hollowed me out. On day 36, a car pulled into the driveway. My heart stopped as the driver got out, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I knew that walk. Frank. I breathed as I opened the door. He looked thinner, rougher, tired down to the soul. But when he lifted his sunglasses, those eyes, those same fierce, beautiful eyes, met mine. "It's done," he said simply. I threw my arms around him, and for the first time in months I felt whole. "What happened?" I asked against his chest. "Joey testified against the Petrovs," he said. "The feds got what they wanted, and I walked away clean. My empire is gone, but I kept enough to start over." My throat tightened. He had sacrificed everything he built, all for me. That night in the small cabin, I traced a new scar on his ribs, a reminder of how close he had come to not making it back. "Was it worth it?" I whispered. He pulled me closer, his lips against my hair. "I spent 20 years building a kingdom of fear," he said, "but the only thing that ever gave me real strength was you." 2 days later, we crossed into Montana with new identities, Mark and Claire Bennett, just two ordinary people starting a new life. We bought a small bookstore in a quiet town. We lived above it in a tiny apartment that smelled like fresh pages and pine wood. It didn't take long before the locals loved us. Frank, now Mark, fixed shelves, brewed coffee, recommended books with surprising gentleness. I finished my nursing degree online. We built a life out of ordinary days and quiet routines. 3 years passed. One afternoon, I found Frank standing in the middle of our shop, looking around with a soft smile. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "That one moment can change everything," he said, pulling me close. 4 words, and my whole life shifted. I smiled up at him. "Not yours to spill," I whispered. He kissed me gently, the kind of kiss filled with gratitude, peace, and a love that survived war and fire. And in that small bookstore, in a quiet American town, a former Mafia boss held the woman who once stood up to him. We chose each other, and we chose freedom.